In the 17th century, the English explorer John sailed to the east coast of America. Due to its similar environment and climate to England, he named it New England. As time went on, to escape religious fear, more and more English people came here. And they built new communities and systems modeled on the English societal model. Thus, the name New England became closely associated with the American states of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. In the 19th century, a terrible monster, who often abused his wife and daughter and almost killed his wife's sister, escaped the police, fled to New England. And later, two shocking murders ensued in this beautiful land. 17-year-old Josie Langmaid lived in Pembroke, New Hampshire. She was a beautiful, smart, and popular girl, loved by friends, family, and neighbors. Perhaps in a few years, Josie would meet a man, get married, have several children, and live together happily. However, a tragic fate befell this girl. Around 8:30 p.m. on October 4th, 1875, in the woods about half a mile from Pembroke School, the search party found Josie's dismembered body. Her torn clothes were scattered over her naked body, and she had been brutally beheaded. Her family collapsed in shock at the scene, unable to believe their daughter had suffered so much or imagine her terror during the ordeal. The next morning, her missing head was found 300 yards from the body. The autopsy report stated Josie had head injuries from blunt force trauma, abrasions, cuts, and a boot mark on her right cheek. Her right hand was broken, and some body parts, along with her earrings and a black enamel gold ring, were missing. The doctor also revealed the most brutal fact. Josie's head was severed while she was still alive. The whole town of Pembroke was horrified by the crime. People wondered why Josie, a popular girl living peacefully with her family and hardly in conflict with anyone, would be murdered and subjected to such cruelty. A Boston detective, assisted by local police, took charge of the case. Initially, due to public pressure, police arrested two tramps and the town's only black resident within a week. One of the homeless men, named Bill, nearly faced a lynch mob, but all three were released for lack of evidence. During the time, Charles, the father of Josie's friend, recounted a strange story. Months prior, he hired a Canadian named Joseph to work for him. What struck him as odd was, not long ago, Joseph had asked Charles's son about a young girl frequently visiting Charles's home. Learning she was Charles's daughter, Joseph urgently inquired what's her name, where's her school, and which way would she take to get to school. It is well known, these strange questions arouse suspicion. But Charles's son, unaware of the implications, he even showed Joseph the way his sister took to school. Consequently, Joseph became a suspect, and police published information about the murder in newspapers. Meanwhile, in St. Albans, Vermont, a man named Abel read the newspaper story about Josie's murder. After carefully observing the sketch of the suspect, Abel recognized him. Abel had been neighbors with Joseph last year, but following a murder in their previous neighborhood, Joseph and his family moved to a small village named Suncook. As a concerned resident, Abel reported this information to the police. In addition, a thought was born in his mind. Joseph was a suspect in Josie's murder, but he had also been a suspect in another murder. The victim, named Ball, was a schoolteacher. On July 24, 1874, she was murdered. Abel suspected Joseph was the attacker in this case as well. October 14th, police rushed to Suncook. Learned Joseph's children worked in a local factory, they asked the owner for Joseph's address. Upon arrival, Charles identified Joseph as the murderer of his daughter's friend. Police then searched Joseph's house. They found a knife hidden on the shelf. Joseph's vest, jacket, and boots had bloodstains, and the boot shape matched the imprint on Josie's cheek. When questioned about his whereabouts during Josie's murder, Joseph stayed silent due to lack of an alibi. His wife testified Joseph was violent, often abused her and the children, and had also assaulted and sexually abused her sister in Canada, and he fled to the U.S. by attacking the police who tried to arrest him. After Joseph's arrest, he was convicted and sentenced to death. With 2 years of fighting, he overturned his first court conviction. However, a second conviction followed, and finally, Joseph was imprisoned in an isolated cell. While there, he repeated his prayer to his faith, looked out the window with longing, and there was a calendar in the cell with a mark on it which stated Joseph's execution date, March 15th, 1878. Before the execution, many journalists and religious figures visited Joseph asking questions. Eventually, he confessed to murdering Josie and Ball. He said, "I killed the girls. Yeah, I killed 2 girls. It's terrible, terrible." In 1874, Joseph and his family arrived in St. Albans. Joseph got a job in a nearby field. By chance, he saw a beautiful young woman, Ball, and he observed this woman pass by the field where he works every day. After weeks of deliberation, finally, Joseph decided to follow this woman. July 24th, a Saturday, Joseph made an excuse, said he was going to pick berries in the neighborhood. Then Joseph put on a crude mask. He walked through the woods and stood on a small hill waiting for the woman to pass by. In fact, he had long noticed Ball passing through this desolate place every Saturday. There were no surprises in the way things unfolded. After Ball walked to where Joseph had ambushed her, she was attacked by him. During the time, Ball pleaded for her life, but in her struggle she accidentally tore off Joseph's mask. It is well known if the victim sees the assailant's face, they are usually killed. Although Ball was physically fit, she was not as strong as Joseph, who often performed physical work. And eventually, Ball was strangled to death, and then Joseph sexually assaulted her corpse. After the sexual assault was over, to ensure Ball's death, Joseph hit Ball again with a rock. Initially, Joseph's target was not Josie, but Charles's daughter. That morning, Charles's daughter waited in the woods for Josie, but when Josie didn't arrive on time, she assumed Josie had gone to school earlier. As it happened, a kind neighbor drove his wagon into the woods, and he agreed to take her to school. So began the twist of fate. 10 minutes later, Josie arrived at the meeting place. She thought her best friend had taken off on foot, so she hurried after her. However, at some point, Josie crossed an isolated path, and Joseph was here waiting for Charles' daughter. Instead of seeing her, he saw Josie. At this moment, Joseph's sanity was consumed by his desire to kill, and he attacked and sexually assaulted Josie. Although Josie fought back and scratched Joseph's neck with her fingernails, his strength far surpassed hers. Eventually, enraged by the neck injury, Joseph decapitated Josie. He then walked to a creek to wash off the blood and hid Josie's wallet, ring, and other items. When Joseph returned to his home in Suncook, his wife curiously asked about the scratches on his neck, which he claimed were caused by poison ivy. At the execution, Joseph was taken to the scaffold by 2 police officers. The sheriff said in a hoarse voice, "Now, Joseph LaPage, in accordance with the command, I proceed to execute the sentence of death by hanging you by the neck until you are dead. And may God have mercy on your soul." After the execution, Joseph was buried in the cemetery of Suncook's Catholic Church at his wife's request. Less than a month after Joseph's execution, a tip from St. Alexander, Quebec, claimed Joseph had likely additionally murdered a mother and daughter. According to the victim's husband, George, his wife and 16-year-old daughter, Minnie, were murdered on October 12, 1867, by Joseph. At that time, the couple took their daughter to a village about 2.5 miles from their home. Then, George's wife met a female friend, so she took Minnie to dinner at her friend's house. When the time reached 6:30 p.m., they left her friend's house. However, until late at night, they didn't go home either. The next day, fearing for his wife and daughter, George sought help from the police. After a lengthy search, the remains of the 2 women were found in the bush next to a pasture near the village. Minnie, like Josie, had been sexually assaulted and her body mutilated. In fact, Joseph was also in the village on the day of the murder. At about 6:30 p.m., Joseph, standing in front of the post office, saw George's wife and daughter pass by the post office, and then he began to follow them. Passing a corner, Joseph made some insulting remarks, which aroused the mother and daughter, who said if he didn't mind his own business, they would have him arrested. Hearing this, Joseph walked in the direction of the post office, saying angrily, if the women did have him hauled up, they would be sorry sometime. Unbeknownst to them, a passerby had witnessed and overheard the entire incident. This person last saw Joseph heading north towards the village, where a path led directly to where the 2 women's remains were found. Following the murders, Joseph wasn't considered a suspect. Instead, a man named Martin was arrested during the investigation, but was soon released due to lack of evidence and his absence from the area at the time of the killings. Learning of Joseph's conviction for the 2 murders, George became convinced Joseph was also the killer of his wife and daughter. He believed if Joseph had lived, he would have been convicted of this crime as well. He said, since Joseph had already been executed, it was pointless to add more crimes to his list. He only brought it up because he wanted to show the world Joseph's dangerous character.